Hello, everyone, and welcome to the writer's class. See, as she was celebrating, I just went on in and got the whole thing. I'm Jade.
I'm mad.
Well, no, her name is Mad. Her name is Mad. That's her name. So Mad. Do you have something to say today, Mad? Did you write some books, Mad?
I wrote about my friend Winona.
You are also
She's a genius.
She's a genius.
I'm sorry, I'm Winona.
No. Your name is Mad, and I'm gonna keep it forever. Oh my goodness,
You've already been right for 5 years. You don't get to keep the name.
Oh no, I will. I think I'm gonna add it into my story. And this one day, Winona, aka Mad. Okay, we wrote books, literary life guides for pop poetry.
The only way to make her quiet.
Mad was definitely involved in it completely. So, and I thought divorce was bad with other life lessons, and I thought being grown up was easy. If only I would meet a memoir in verse. The Widow's Debt series 1 and 2, books 1 and 2, not series 1 and 2. That would be weird.
Really wish I could write.
And for in coffee, all available where you get your audiobooks, or you can go on over to our website, www.andithoughtleads.com, and see one of my favorite. See one of my favorite books, and I Thought I Did My Journey Alone, soon to be coming to audiobook, hopefully. All right.
Soon one day.
Soon one day.
There you go.
Okay, thank you, Mad, for adding that in. It was like a Mad lib. Can I have
We're not
high five?
Yes. Actually, that was pretty good.
It was, right? Come on. Okay, yes. So
Yeah,
y'all out here to hear about us.
You're here to hear about our wonderful guest.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Monica Prince. I teach activist and performance writing at Susquehanna University in Pennsylvania. I'm the author of the Korea poem, How to Exterminate the Black Woman. And last year, I staged my first play that I co-authored with Anna Andes called The Pageant of Agitating Women, which is about suffrage and the untold stories of women of color during the women's movement. So glad to be here.
Ooh, you did a lot of work in 2020. Like, I don't even think I did much. I think I was asleep.
Girl, we invented an entire clothing line that has multiple
I did that.
I was gonna say.
In the morning.
Did y'all do a lot of stuff?
We did a lot of stuff, but it was like 2 a.m. in the morning. So
wait, did you do your homework and look us up?
Don't do it.
Isn't that what you're supposed to do? Isn't that how you prepare for an interview?
I have no idea.
I hate when people do that. It's so upsetting.
They'd be like, and then they'd be like, I have another question. How about this? You'd be like, what about that? I don't know. Anyway. So you did a play. So how was switching over from writing a book to writing a play?
Yeah, absolutely. So I write choreo poems, which are choreographed series of poems, which are like plays, except they are poems put together with dance music, yoga, all that good stuff all together. And so when I decided to write this play with my friend Anna Andy, she's a theater professor at the same university I work at. And she said, 2020 is the centennial anniversary of white women's suffrage. I remember when she said white women's suffrage, I was like, yeah, Anna, you're right. It is for white women. So you're right. Let's talk about that. And she's like, I want to do a year-long season through the department, focusing on women of color in the suffrage movement. And I said, okay. And she said, so let's talk about how we can find these plays. Let's do them together. And so she researched for a whole summer looking for a play that was written by a woman that focused on women of color and that was focused on American suffrage instead of British suffrage. Because there's lots of plays written by women, not a lot of women of color, but by women about British suffrage, but not about American suffrage. And she couldn't find a single play. And so she's like, this is disgusting. And I was like, yeah, it's like, let's write our own. I was like, okay, I don't know anything about suffrage, except that Black women didn't get the right to vote until 1964, and that's it. And she's like, well, I know a bunch about suffrage, and we'll just get some students to do some research for us, and we'll write a play. And that's what we did. And so it's called The Pageant of Agitating Women. It's based on the play Pageant of Great Women, which is about British suffrage, written in 1909 by Cicely Hamilton. And our show encompasses everything from the abolition movement all the way through the Black Lives Matter movement. It talks a lot about how suffrage rights are linked to abolition, specifically like getting rid of slavery, how they're also linked to reproductive rights, and how they're also linked to civil rights, and so on and so forth. So we walk you through chronologically the whole process of how abolition was linked with suffrage, how it got removed from suffrage, the betrayal of white women in the suffrage movement, the betrayal of Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, stating, specifically Susan B. Anthony saying she cut off her right arm before she advocated for the vote for the Negro over the woman. That's her legitimate quote. And we talked about like how white women were prepared to throw Black women under the bus to get the vote before them, and how racism is deeply tied to civil rights. And it's a wild, incredible play. There's people who are still alive in the show, like Angela Davis and Gloria Steinem, and Michelle Duster, who's a great granddaughter of Ida B. Wells. And then there's all these other people who you've probably never heard of. Well, not y'all. Y'all have probably heard of them. Like Ida B. Wells and Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth, but also Mary Church Terrell and Julia A.J. Foote and these other fabulous Black women activists who fought for suffrage. And it doesn't just include Black women. There's a lot of Black women in the show, but also Latinx women, Native American women, Asian American women. We tried to get as many women of color in that show as humanly possible. Ultimately, there are 72 characters in the play. It's about 2 hours long. It's the hardest thing I've ever written in my life, but it was a lot of fun. It was the last normal thing we did before pandemic. It went up in February 2020.
And I was thinking that must have been really hard to get all of that into like a time that people want to sit.
Yep.
and all the research and to make it historically correct. I mean, she should have just written a book series.
We think about that every time.
And then had it adapted.
Yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot. It's a good play though. We're very proud of it.
So do you ever think you're going to write a book series off of it?
I mean, we'll probably write more plays because it's our medium. Like that's how Anna and I think. It's like it's our medium. It's just the idea of being in front of an audience, interacting with the audience. It's like very key to what we do. So we'll probably write another play if we continue that. But for the most part, like it was a lot of fun. I learned a lot, which I like, it's good to learn while you write.
Do you ever
Weird,
think,
I'm quiet. Go ahead.
do you ever think you're going to do an audio play, like something that we can listen to on Audible or something we can put up on iTunes or something like that? Do you think you would write one of those?
Oh, I have those. So the choreo poems I do work really well also audibly. So even if you can't see what's happening, like the words themselves are honestly probably more important than what's physically happening on stage, depending on which show you're looking at. The show that I published last year, How to Exterminate the Black Woman, works really well on audio. So that's just like a matter of negotiating things with my contract and figuring out how the press wants to move forward with that. But it is something that I've thought about because I did a staged reading of it on Zoom earlier this year, and that was a lot of fun because people would just be like sitting listening to it, and it was just this wild ride because they were able to visualize instead of having to be forced to see what the directors or the choreographers make decisions about, which was a lot of fun. So yeah, absolutely.
Fabulous. I can look forward to listening to all of these plays in the series of plays.
And the choreo part.
Yes.
So our two questions have nothing to do with each other, but I'm gonna ask them anyway.
I love it.
In part B. Part A. You studied abroad. Can you tell us about that? And part B, what is choreo pro?
Oh yeah. So I studied abroad in Dakar, Senegal in 2010, which was that was probably the hardest 4 months of my life. It was beautiful and wonderful and really difficult because I went, it was the first time I lived abroad without like my parents around. My parents are from Guyana. And so they immigrated that's the right word, immigrated to the US in the 80s. And they've been here ever since. And so leaving the country was just always like, that's a thing you're going to do because you're a Black woman in the world. So like, you would never stay in one place. Why would you stay in one place? And so I've been all over the US and I've been around the world with my parents, but I'd never been away living somewhere by myself for the first time. So that was kind of wild. I had to speak French most of the time. The whole time I was there, I was fluent in French. I also learned Wolof, which is one of the national languages in Senegal. And I learned a lot about just like the history of French occupation and the ways that religion are tied to patriarchy and children's rights and things of that nature. And it was like really emotional and really hard. It was a hard 4 months. I loved it, but I also know I'm never going to go back, which makes me kind of sad. It was so beautiful and spectacular and so hard. And it was hard in a way that made it a little bit irreparable for me to return. I have a whole essay about this in my memoir that I'm working on that talks about how really wonderful things get tainted by really bad experiences. Singular things can ruin something wonderful. And I had some guy follow me through a market, proposing to me over and over and over again. And when I finally said no, he freaked out, hurt me, and that was fun. And then I had another classmate propose to me multiple times, and then refusing to show me the ring because he was afraid that if he showed me the ring and I said no, that he would react badly, which was his way of saying, I'm probably going to hit you. And I was like, okay, I need to get out of this country. And it was just, I learned a lot and it was gorgeous and I had so much fun, but it was a deeply traumatizing experience, which is rough because it's required. My students at Susquehanna, they're required to do study away. So not all of them go abroad. Some of them stay in the country, but they have to leave campus for 2.5 weeks. And a lot of them go out of the country. And so it's hard to tell them this is the most important experience of your life, while it'll also be something really dangerous and scary. But also that's how you learn. You go do dangerous and scary things. So I don't regret it. I'm glad I went, but it was also deeply traumatizing and I'm never going back. So to answer your first question.
I totally feel that's such a poetic way to put it. It was so traumatizing, but yet if I hadn't had it, my whole life course would be
so
not what I am now.
Yeah, it would have been completely different.
Writers need something to write about. And I mean, traumatic situations, well, that's great writing material. Great writing content.
And we're gonna hate mail for that statement right there. And then I'm gonna say, y'all, I mean, I know, but sometimes when you have greatly wonderful things that happen to you, your best friend gave you a kidney or something, write about that for the next 20 years, right? Just please.
Yes. Yes. You can do both. It's fine. The traumatizing stuff and the great stuff. It's good.
Exactly. And then that's how you make a book.
That's true.
Because if it's just
that's how you make a book.
We learn the hard way. If it's just the trauma, no one gets through it.
Well, Roxane Gay says that. Yeah, but it takes them a while. Roxane Gay says that. She's you shouldn't spend your first book cannibalizing your trauma. It's not good for you and it's hard for your readers.
It is really hard.
It is really hard for our readers. This is why y'all, and I thought the voice was bad, is better as an audiobook.
Yeah.
Because it's easier to listen to rather than read. Interesting.
There's so many reviews that say this is a great book and I give it 5 stars because I know when I get through it, it's gonna be fabulous. But I'm in therapy right now. Basically, I have unresolved issues. I didn't know. I thought I got rid of them, but now I know.
That's for real. That's writing. That's writing for you.
Oh yeah.
No.
Second question.
No. We still did
the Chorea poem.
Chorea poem.
A Chorea poem. So Chorea poem is a choreographed series of poems. It was created in 1975 by Ntozake Shange, may she rest in power. And she wrote for colored girls who've considered suicide when the rainbow's enough, which is my all-time favorite book on the planet ever. And that book talks about just Black women of color, just trying to be themselves in a world that doesn't really care about them. And so I've been studying those since college, and I wrote one when I was in undergrad called Confessions in Living Colored. It's now called Testify. And that show was about college-age people of color navigating predominantly white spaces, trying to figure out how to live the best life possible. So that show went up in 2012, and then it was rewritten and revised and went up again in 2015 in New York, and it was wonderful and fabulous, and it's a great show, and I'm very proud of it. And then I went to graduate school, and that show, the show I wrote for graduate school is called Something to Keep Me Vertical, and that's about love, sex, and relationships, specifically related to millennials. And so at the time, it focuses a lot on, it doesn't talk about the specific aspects of dating. So it doesn't talk about online dating and all of that, but it talks about polyamory, transitioning, what it means to fall in love, threesomes, the first time you have sex, why we keep our virginity. Because apparently, I don't know if y'all knew this, that teenagers are having less and less sex. And it's been going down. It's been going down in terms of the number of teenagers who are having sex before 18. And it's getting to like an all-time low at this point, which is really interesting. It's in comparison to previous generations who were having sex at like 13, 14, and 15. But today's teenagers are having less and less sex. And no one is really sure why. And I was interested in that. And so I wrote about that. So there's stuff about virginity, there's stuff about love, there's stuff about cheating. There's a lot of stuff about cheating. There's also stuff about like having a first child and things like that. So that show was a lot of fun and has way too many people in it, but it was a lot of fun to write. And then the third one I wrote was How to Exterminate the Black Woman, which is about a woman named Angela who has this realization that the world wants to consume her labor, but they don't want her. And it kind of fractures her into 6 emotions: expectation, silence, loss, fear, fury, and new. And these 6 emotions kind of navigate the space, performing poems about sex and rape and emotional turmoil, but also like hair. There's a whole poem in there about hair. It's called Big Chop. And a lot of these poems are sestinas, it's an old French form that uses repeating words throughout. And so eventually by the end of the show, New, who wears purple, she performs a spell to put everyone back together to bring Angela back on stage. And then she performs this last poem called How to Exterminate the Black Woman, which basically emphasizes like, is it possible to exterminate the Black woman? And then my 4th choreo poem is called Roadmap, and it's about a young man of color. So I have to stop saying that. It's a young Black man. I know that now. It was originally a man of color, but then I like rewrote the show. So now it's a young Black man who is navigating his most likely cause of death, because according to the CDC, Black men ages 15 to 34, their most likely cause of death is homicide. And so he's like trying to figure out, is that inevitable for him just because he's a Black man, or are there things he can do to prevent that from happening? And it's a little bit ambiguous near the end about whether or not that's true. And then the 5th one that I'm working on now is called Insert Fantasy Here, and it's about sex, love, and polyamory and pleasure. And it was inspired by the book Pussy Prayers by Black Girl Bliss, which is this fabulous online educational collective. And they were talking in Pussy Prayers, they talk a lot about like how pleasure is a way forward and how it like helps you reclaim your understanding of like yourself. So then from there, I started reading Pleasure Activism by Adrienne Marie Brown, which everyone should read because it's brilliant. And I'm only halfway through and it's just like changing my whole life. But like these ideas of how do we navigate pleasure and where can we get pleasure? And as women of color, like how do we gain pleasure in a world that doesn't really think we deserve it? So I'm writing a play about that, or a choreo poem about that. And like, that's what I do. The shows themselves break the 4th wall. So there's a lot of audience interaction. So like people will ask you point blank questions and ask you to participate. There's lots of dancing, an obscene amount of dancing. There's lots of yoga now. I put a lot of yoga in the shows. In the most recent show I've written, Insert Fantasy Here, there's a lot of drinking. She drinks a lot of wine on stage. Bless her. It's like a 1-woman show, but there's like 15 other people around her, but she has the most, she doesn't leave the stage. Like she's on the stage the whole time. There's lots of drinking, lots of dancing. She gets tied up in a BDSM outfit at some point. It's a wild show. It's a wild show. So choreo poems, that's what they are.
Wow. Okay. So now
I feel like that's the show. Okay.
I feel like it is. It feels like that's the show where I have like questions to ask. So what advice would you give new writers that are trying to break into the field? And then second, where can people check out some of these choreo poems and find out more about you?
Absolutely. Okay. So I have so much advice for emerging writers because I was an emerging writer for so long. So I work for an independent press called Santa Fe Writers Project, and we publish all kinds of weird books of all types. So like everyone check us out. Like you can find it through my website, which is a link to the last question. But so we focus on how emerging writers can get involved. Like 1, read. This is something weird I have to tell my students all the time. Like you have to read. Like read stuff that you like, read stuff that is out of your comfort zone. Sure, you can like read what they call the classics, right? Like, you know, everyone should read Frankenstein because it's an amazing book, but like, you don't have to read Ernest Hemingway. It won't kill you. You'll be fine. But then you can read, like, I mean, you look so upset.
I'm not upset. I'm not upset at all. Yeah. Well, I mean, well, you didn't say you should read like Pride and Prejudice, which is like my all-time
You can read Pride and Prejudice. Those books are great. Like they're great for a reason. They're taught for a reason because they're brilliant, right? But like there's also all these fabulous other books that we don't read, right? Like anything Toni Morrison has ever written ever, everybody should read. Like everybody, all of them, all of it, all of it. But like reading books outside of your comfort zone, reading books by authors who have nothing to do with you. Like during the Seeley Challenge, which is a challenge created by Nicole Seeley, who is part of Cave Canem. In August, you're supposed to read a book of poetry or a chapbook of poetry every single day for the month of August. And she encourages you to read books by writers of color, disabled writers, queer writers, and women writers. And I'm like, I love that idea. I'm actually going to read a lot of books by white people because I'm sad and I don't want, and I'm afraid that if I read books by people like me, I'm going to be sadder. And so I read a bunch of books by white men and I was like, is this how y'all live? Like, do you have any problems? Is it nice? But even so, like reading their work helped me better understand my place in the literary community. So first, number one is read. Number two is write what you want to write. I think I have a lot of writers who go through creative writing programs or who take classes or who, you know, are obsessed with writing in a way that they only want it to look a certain way. And that's a huge disservice to the work that they do, right? Like if I had kept writing like my college professors, which is, they're perfectly wonderful people, like I would not be writing choreo poems because none of my college professors were Black. And so if I was writing like them, like I'd be, I don't know, writing about flowers, I guess. Flowers are nice, but I don't really know anything about them. So instead I get to write about politics, and I get to write about yoga, and I get to write about assault and police brutality and things like that, which matter more to me. So there's that. Number three, genre is a social construct and it doesn't matter. So like, I loved how y'all were talking about like memoir and essays or memoir and verse, something, and you had all these different like
literary life guides with pop poetry.
Yes, all these like categories of like different, exactly. Genre is a social construct and it doesn't exist. So like, who cares what, like, it doesn't matter how you categorize your writing, as long as you enjoy it, like do it. Because there have been literary journals and presses that publish weird stuff forever, and we will continue to publish weird stuff forever because genre doesn't exist. Number four would be read the journals you submit to. So if you submit to literary journals, read those journals before you submit them. And then the last thing is rejection is a part of life and it's not going to kill you. So just, there are other ways around it. Like if you decide that you want to do it yourself, you can. Easy. And if you decide you don't want to do it yourself and you want to go the traditional publishing route, it's going to take a lot of time, but like the right publisher will pick up your book and the right editor will work with you. So a good example is we're publishing I'm Not Hungry, But I Could Eat. I can see it out of the corner of my eye right now. And it's by Christopher Gonzalez, who's this phenomenal Puerto Rican fiction writer in New York. And he gives me exceeding joy. I love him. And we're publishing his debut collection. And he was like so nervous to give it to me because he's like, I don't want you to publish it just because we're friends. I was like, I'm not publishing it because we're friends. I'm publishing this because it's going to change people's lives. And like, and it was just like that sort of trust of, I'm going to give this to you because you say you want to read it, but I'm totally okay if you don't want to take it. And how that was just like a good way of us like entering into agreement for this book. And now this book has sold like 1,500 copies. Like it hasn't even come out yet. Like it doesn't come out for like 2 more weeks, and it's sold all these copies. He's getting all this attention, and he deserves it because it's an incredible book, but it's also, he deserves it because he trusted the process of like, I wrote these pieces, I revised these pieces, I worked with an editor I trusted, and I submitted to a press that I trusted. So just having that sort of being willing to lean into rejection and know that it's not the end of the world, and that there's always going to be space for our writing. There's always, what do they say? We just build a bigger table, that kind of idea. Like you don't need to fight, you don't have to kick someone else out of the table to just bigger table, put more leaves in the thing, make the table longer. There we go. Those are all the words.
All the words. I love it. I love it because we say that all the time. Okay, where can people read all your words? Like on your website.
All my words. So I have a website. It's www.monicaprince.com. I try to update it. I'm really bad at it, but I'm trying to keep it updated. So you can read my latest essay on there. It's called Grief is an Excuse. And it talks about me trying to come to terms with the fact that I never want to have children. And then you can also read all my poems on there. Any poems I've published in the last 2 years, well, except for the last 2 that I published recently, are on there. And you can see all those. Best way to keep in contact in terms of seeing what I'm actually doing in real time is to follow me on Twitter, because that has all the things. I publish all the things on Twitter and just like say, yes, look at this link, follow these people, they will give you my stuff. I have 3 books out. Those are all those links are on my website as well. There's Letters from the Other Woman, which is a chapbook about adultery. There is Instructions for Temporary Survival, which is a full-length poetry collection about surviving the things we think we can't. And then How to Exterminate the Black Woman, my Korea poem. And they're all linked up there.
Thank you so much for coming on today.
It's been so enjoyable.
Yeah, we had the best time, and we used all the words. So I mean, that's amazing.
And she made our jobs easy.
I know,
right? It was like, I have 6 questions. Oh no, there it goes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Good.
Professor. Professor. That's how you know, right? All right. So thank you so much for coming on today. I'll go ahead and wrap this up. You can find out everything ladies are doing on www.andithoughladies.com. While you're there, take a moment, go to the middle of the page and see the charities that we probably support. Maybe you can support them also. We thank you in advance for that. And just remember, y'all, wisdom is all around you if
you're open to finding it and accepting it. Peace and love, you guys, from Winona
and Jade. Bye-bye. Oh yeah, thanks for listening.